Spring, 146 BC. The air over the shattered harbour of Carthage tastes of ash and salt. Smoke coils into a sky the colour of bruised iron. The stone streets are slick with dust and broken tiles, and somewhere in the maze of collapsing walls, a temple door crashes open under the weight of iron. You are standing in a city that will not exist tomorrow. Roman standards rise above the rubble, crimson banners snapping against the wind. The legions of the Scipio Aemilianus have breached the final defences of Carthage after 3 years of siege. The Third Punic War is ending, not with negotiation, but with annihilation. And yet, what you are about to witness is not only the fall of walls, it is something quieter, colder, calculated. If you've ever wondered what history tried to erase, subscribe now. Every view revives voices silenced for centuries. Because in the shadows of conquest, beyond the burning docks and collapsing temples, another weapon was being unsheathed, one that did not pierce flesh, but identity. A weapon designed not merely to kill, but to unmake. Sexual humiliation, not desire, not chaos, but strategy. Ancient warfare was not only about territory, it was about domination of memory, of lineage, of dignity. To strip a defeated enemy physically was to declare them socially dead. To parade captives unclothed through the streets of Rome was to tell the world, your gods did not protect you. Your bloodline is broken. Your honour belongs to us now. But imagine this from the inside. A priestess in her early 30s, let us call her Livia, though her real name has been lost, stands bound at the wrists in the courtyard of a desecrated shrine. The marble beneath her feet is cracked, smeared with soot. She hears the roar of soldiers outside the gates, the metallic clatter of armour, the low murmur of Latin commands. She has served her city's gods since childhood. She believed stone walls meant protection. She believed sacred vows created invisible shields. Now those shields are gone. What would you do if every vow you held sacred could be taken from you? Ancient chroniclers rarely describe these moments directly. Roman historians such as Polybius wrote of sieges, numbers, treaties. They recorded troop movements, casualties, grain shortages. But between the lines, in passing references to spoils and captives, lies something darker. In Greek city-states, in the Persian campaigns, in the wars of Assyria, humiliation was a language of power. Victorious armies understood that breaking the body could terrorize a generation. But breaking honor could silence one forever. Clay reliefs from Nineveh show chained prisoners marched naked before kings. Inscriptions boast not only of slaughter, but of public shaming. These were not accidents of brutality. They were messages carved in stone. You are about to witness how this weapon evolved across civilizations, from the Near East to the Mediterranean, shaping societies long after the fires died. And here, in the ruins of Carthage, Livia understands something before the soldiers even reach her. This is not just defeat. It is erasure. The temple doors splinter inward. The first soldier steps across the threshold, and the war changes shape. The soldier who steps into the shrine does not look at Livia as a person. He looks at her as inventory. Outside, the machinery of victory is already turning. Roman officers move through the city with wax tablets and styluses, cataloguing assets, bronze statues, grain stores, livestock, and human beings. The word they use is praeda, spoils. In the ledgers of empire, there is no column for dignity. After the fall of Carthage in 146 BC, tens of thousands were sold into slavery. Ancient accounts, including those summarized by Appian, describe the systematic destruction of the city. Yet, buried in administrative language is something more chilling. Captives were sorted by age, strength, and appearance. Why appearance? Because humiliation was never random. It was strategic theatre. In Rome, triumphal processions were spectacles of psychological warfare. Defeated leaders were paraded in chains before cheering crowds. Women of noble families were sometimes displayed to emphasize the conqueror's total domination over lineage and honor. The message traveled far beyond the city gates. Resist us, and your identity itself will be undone. Notice how history tried to erase these voices. You are seeing them for the first time. The logic was ancient. Assyrian reliefs from Nineveh show captives stripped and marched before kings like Ashurbanipal. Greek historians such as Herodotus recorded episodes during the Persian Wars where defeated populations were publicly shamed to fracture their morale. Humiliation functioned as contagion. One body dishonored meant an entire community destabilized. Inside the shattered shrine, Livia hears soldiers debating in low voices. One gestures toward the sacred statues, another toward the captives huddled near the altar. Their tone is transactional. Detached, the priestess feels the air shift, not just from smoke, but from understanding. They are not interested in her prayers. They are interested in what her public degradation would mean. In ancient societies, a woman tied to temple service represented continuity, sacred lineage, divine favor, social stability. To desecrate that symbol was to announce the death of the old order. The Romans understood spectacle. They mastered it. But Rome was not unique. In 689 BC, when the Assyrian king Sennacherib sacked Babylon, inscriptions boast of not only raising temples, but humiliating captives to demonstrate divine supremacy. Clay tablets describe the humiliation of elites to signal that even gods had been overpowered. Imagine the psychological architecture of that moment. If your spiritual leaders are shamed, what remains sacred? If your mothers and daughters are displayed as proof of defeat, what future feels safe? This was the deeper calculus. Humiliation collapses resistance faster than swords alone. Livia is pulled to her feet. Outside, the city screams, not just in pain, but in the sound of something intangible breaking. Faith. Order. Identity. She looks once more at the cracked marble altar. In her mind, she whispers a prayer, not for survival, but for memory. Because she understands something terrifying, the body can be captured. But memory, if preserved, can outlive empires. The soldiers drag her into the daylight, and the crowd is already gathering. The sunlight outside the shrine is blinding after the smoke-filled dark. Livia stumbles forward as the soldiers pull her into the open square. The once sacred plaza is now a theatre. Columns lie cracked across the paving stones. The bronze doors of the temple hang twisted from their hinges. Roman legionaries form a perimeter, shields raised not against attack, but to contain the spectacle. Because this is no longer battle, it is demonstration. In ancient warfare, humiliation did not erupt in chaos. It unfolded with choreography. The captives are arranged deliberately, priests separated from merchants, nobles from labourers, symbols dismantled in front of witnesses. A Roman officer reads from a tablet, voice steady, detached. Property of the Republic. Confiscated. Reassigned. The words echo in Livia's ears like blows. To be catalogued is to be reduced. To be stripped of title, of sacred status, of clothing that once marked spiritual authority. This is not mere physical exposure. It is social annihilation. Across centuries, the pattern repeats. In 70 C, when Roman forces under Titus captured Jerusalem, the historian Flavius Josephus recorded scenes of captives paraded in triumph, sacred objects from the temple carried through Rome as trophies. The Arch of Titus still stands today, carved in stone, memorializing that humiliation. Look closely at that relief, and you will see more than plunder. You will see a civilization announcing, "Your God did not save you." Humiliation was theological warfare. Back in Carthage, the crowd grows. Survivors forced to watch. Soldiers laugh, officers observing, measuring reaction. Fear spreads faster than fire. Livia's mind races. She feels heat rising from the stones beneath her bare feet. She remembers her initiation ceremony as a child. Incense in the air, oil on her forehead, whispered vows of protection. She believed the gods watched. Now she wonders, are they silent or simply witnessing? What would you do standing there, knowing your degradation is meant to echo for generations? The crisis is not only external, it is internal. She can scream, she can curse, she can collapse, or she can deny them the satisfaction of visible terror. That is the battlefield now, not her body, but her composure. Ancient texts rarely preserve the voices of women in these moments, but fragments survive. A Greek tragedy by Euripides, The Trojan Women, imagines captured queens confronting enslavement after Troy's fall. Though dramatized, it reflects lived realities of wartime humiliation. The play trembles with psychological truth. When status is destroyed, identity must be rebuilt internally, or it shatters completely. Livia straightens her spine. The officer notices. There is irritation in his gaze. Defiance, even silent, disrupts spectacle. Humiliation requires visible submission to complete its message. Without it, the theatre falters. A murmur ripples through the captives. Some weep openly. Others stare at the ground. Children cling to mothers. The air smells of sweat, ash, and fear, thick, metallic. A soldier steps closer, attempting to provoke a reaction. Laughter from the ranks. But Livia's face remains still. Inside, however, she trembles. She thinks of the temple archives, scrolls hidden beneath the altar floor, names of priestesses stretching back generations, ritual instructions, hymns. If she survives, she must remember them. If she does not, someone must. That thought becomes her anchor. Humiliation seeks to convince its victim that they are nothing. Resistance begins by remembering you are not. The officer signals. The captives are divided into groups, destined for different fates: slavery, labour, public display in Rome's triumph. Livia is pulled toward a separate column. The ship waits at the harbour, and the sea wind carries the promise of exile, or something worse. The harbour of fallen Carthage groans under the weight of chains. Ships creak against the docks as captives are herded aboard in measured groups. The sea wind is sharp, salted with smoke. Ropes scrape against wood. Orders barked in Latin cut through the air like blades. Livia stands among a cluster of women marked for transport to Rome. Not executed, not discarded, displayed. She understands now, humiliation does not end in the square. It travels. It is exported. It becomes policy. The Romans perfected this theatre. During triumphs, defeated peoples were paraded before the Senate and citizens. Proof of dominion. When Julius Caesar celebrated victories in Gaul, captives were led through the streets in chains before crowds intoxicated by spectacle. The ritual was not spontaneous cruelty. It was statecraft, humiliation ritualized into civic identity. But rituals can be answered with rituals. On the ship's lower deck, in darkness broken only by slits of light, the captives sit pressed shoulder to shoulder. Chains clink softly with each shift of movement. The smell of damp wood and human fear fills the hold. A young girl beside Livia trembles uncontrollably. Perhaps 15, perhaps younger. Will they shame us again? She whispers. The question is barely audible over the waves striking hull. Livia pauses. This is the moment humiliation seeks, the internal collapse, the acceptance of permanent degradation. Instead, she leans closer and speaks quietly. They can display the body, she says, voice steady despite exhaustion. They cannot command the soul. It is a dangerous sentence. If overheard, punishment would follow. But it spreads, almost invisibly, from woman to woman. A current of defiance beneath enforced silence. In ancient Assyria, reliefs from Nineveh depicted captives naked and bound, emphasizing vulnerability. The intention was clear: terrorize future rebels. Yet archaeology reveals something else. In the ruins of destroyed cities, hidden beneath floors and inside sealed jars, scholars have found preserved amulets, small figurines, fragments of sacred texts. evidence of secret continuity. Humiliation is loud. Resistance is often quiet. On the third night at sea, Livia gathers a few women in the darkness. They cannot light a lamp. They cannot kneel openly, but they recite from memory fragments of hymns once sung in marble halls now reduced to rubble. The words tremble at first, then grow steadier. A ritual reborn in chains. Micro-defiance. Every empire underestimates this stage, the invisible reconstruction of identity. Rome could parade bodies, but it could not fully police thought. It could not extinguish memory carried in whispers. Above deck, soldiers gamble and laugh, unaware that beneath their boots a cultural archive is being preserved in human minds. Livia feels transformation unfolding within her. Fear remains, sharp, present, but layered over it is resolve. She is no longer merely surviving humiliation, she is documenting it internally. Storing details. Faces. Voices. Injustices. If she lives to reach Rome, she will watch. She will remember the route of the procession, the jeers of the crowd, the symbols displayed, and memory will become testimony. Notice this shift. Humiliation intends to fracture identity, yet in some cases it forges it. As the ship approaches the Italian coast, dawn spills pale light over the horizon. The women are ordered above deck. The shoreline of their conquerors rises ahead, temples, columns, walls of white stone. The stage is prepared, but something has changed. Livia is no longer simply an object in Rome's narrative of victory. She has become a witness. And witnesses, even in chains, carry power. Before we move into the final reckoning, pause for a moment, comment where you are watching from, and share this story with someone who needs to see the truth hidden by empires. These were realities carved into stone, yet rarely spoken aloud. The harbour of Rome draws closer. The triumph awaits. Rome rises from the morning mist like a monument to inevitability. Marble steps gleam beneath a pale sun. Crowds press against wooden barricades, their voices swelling in anticipation. Incense burns near the temples, lining the route of the triumphal procession. Trumpets sound, sharp, metallic, triumphant. The captives are brought forward. Livia feels the stone of the Via Sacra beneath her feet, warm already from the day's heat. Chains link her to the women beside her. Ahead, wagons carry looted statues and sacred vessels, relics stripped from Carthage's temples. Roman citizens cheer as each object passes. The spoils are more than treasure. They are proof. Proof that an entire civilization has been undone. On the Arch of Titus, carved decades later, you can still see the relief of sacred objects carried from Jerusalem in 70 C. Stone remembers humiliation. It preserves it in triumphal narrative. The conqueror writes the script, chisels the memory, declares the meaning. But stone tells only one side. As Livia is paraded through the forum, she does not lower her eyes. Around her, the crowd expects submission, visible collapse to complete the theatre of domination. A humiliated body reinforces the myth of invincibility. Instead, she walks upright. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it disrupts something. A boy in the crowd notices. His laughter fades for a second. An elderly woman narrows her eyes, studying the captives not as spectacle, but as human beings. The shift is tiny, but real. Humiliation seeks totality. It demands that the victim internalize the conqueror's narrative. But what happens when they refuse? Roman triumphs often ended with the execution of enemy leaders, their deaths marking the final punctuation in the sentence of conquest. The historian Livy wrote of these spectacles as civic celebrations, reinforcing unity through shared dominance. Yet even Livy admits something between the lines. Fear underpins empire. Spectacle is designed not only to celebrate victory, but to prevent rebellion. Humiliation is preventative violence, and it carries consequences. Generations after Carthage fell, Roman writers still invoked its destruction as a warning. The phrase Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed, echoed in political speeches long after the city was ash. Why repeat it? Because the memory of annihilation was meant to discipline the future. But memory moves in two directions. Archaeologists excavating Carthage centuries later uncovered layers of burned earth, and beneath them, fragments of everyday life, pottery, inscriptions, household shrines. Life interrupted, not erased. Identity fractured, not extinguished. Humiliation, used as a weapon, leaves scars deeper than physical wounds. It reshapes families, alters social structures, instills generational trauma. In ancient societies, honor defined status. To publicly strip that honor was to destabilize inheritance, marriage prospects, political legitimacy. It was psychological warfare long before the term existed. Yet history also reveals something unexpected. Communities subjected to ritualized humiliation often developed stronger internal cohesion. Oral traditions preserved stories of endurance. Secret rites emerged in exile. Faith, reframed through suffering, became quieter but more resilient. On the final day of the triumph, as Livia is led toward her assigned fate within Rome, slavery in a noble household, perhaps, she makes a silent vow. They will remember us only as defeated. But we will remember ourselves as witnesses. That vow is the true counter-weapon. Across centuries, from Assyrian reliefs in Nineveh to Roman arches towering over the Forum, empires carved humiliation into stone. They believed spectacle equaled permanence. But permanence belongs to those who endure and testify. Today, when historians study clay tablets, inscriptions, triumphal arches, and charred ruins, they reconstruct not only the story of conquerors, but of the humiliated. Scholars analyze administrative records, listing captives as numbers, then search for the human realities beneath those numbers. Because behind every ledger entry was a face, a mind, a will. You have just witnessed how sexual humiliation functioned as a deliberate instrument of ancient war, not random cruelty, but calculated domination aimed at identity itself. It destabilized societies, reinforced imperial mythologies, and shaped collective memory for centuries. But it did not succeed in erasing those who endured it. The voices you've just witnessed refuse to vanish. Subscribe, share, and keep their courage alive. Their story deserves to survive. Because every time we remember what was meant to be hidden, we weaken the weapon that once relied on silence. And history, when confronted honestly, becomes something powerful, not a monument to domination, but a testament to survival.